Welcome to Alternate Ending, where we discover good movies, one bad movie at a time. I am your host, Tim Brayton, and we have a very special, very solemn, very sad episode of the show. As you've perhaps seen from the announcement on our Discord or announcement on the site, we have recently mourned the loss of Rob Jarosinski, the co-founder and co-owner of the site, and really the prime mover, I would say, the person whose vision this site was, whose kind of passion this podcast was. So we've decided to take this opportunity to bring back a long dormant feature. It was one of Rob's favorite parts of recording this podcast, which was our top 5 episode. We will today be giving you, in honor of Rob, our top 5 movies from the IMDb Top 250, because as friend of the site and regular contributor to the site, Gavin McDowell, said on one occasion, Rob basically was the human incarnation of the IMDb Top 250. So we thought, what better way to celebrate him than to celebrate the kinds of movies he cared about most, which was the films sort of commemorated on that list. With me to join in this celebration and farewell to our friend are Brennan Klein, regular co-host of our horror podcast, Bride of Alternate Ending, as well as Mandy Albert, who you probably recognize from her wonderful work writing about the various films to have won the Razzie for Worst Picture of the Year. Brennan, Mandy, welcome both. Thank you both for being here.
Hello, thank you for having me, Tim.
Very happy to be here.
Yeah.
You shouldn't be happy. You should be very sad. This is a very sad day.
I am sad about the circumstances. I am still happy to be talking about movies with the two of you.
For sure.
And that's the thing. We were talking beforehand about what's the right tone to strike with having this conversation. And it's really, really complicated because obviously this podcast doesn't exist without Rob. The broader alternate ending community doesn't exist without Rob, and certainly the Gavin mocking Rob with the human IMDb Top 250 general conversation that we're having does not exist without Rob. But also, we want this episode to be not so solemn. That's not what alternate ending ever was. That's not what Rob's contributions to it ever were. I wanted it to be a celebration of life and the way that he wanted the podcast to be, and the way that cinema made him feel and the thing that he wanted to share about it. Does that make sense?
It does. It absolutely does. And certainly it would be disingenuous for me to deny that when we did do top 5 episodes, I would spend a large portion of those making fun of Rob and his taste in movies. And I feel like he would want this to be a
I was
going to
say, would he want it any other way?
I don't know if he would, but he didn't get it any other way. So
fair enough.
So there you go.
Would he have agreed to podcast with you in the first place if he were not ready to have his taste in movies relentlessly mocked?
I sure hope not, because otherwise I was just a real asshole to him, and that would make me feel a certain way right now, and I don't feel that way, so I'll just assume that I was a good match.
Exactly.
But yes, so we are going to be sharing our top 5s from the IMDb 250. We will be also sharing some testimonials from listeners and users of the site who have thoughts about Rob's impact on their life as we go through the episode. But let's kick things off the way we would always kick off things on our top 5 episodes. And I guess that would just be to say, do you have any kind of special criteria? Or is it just, I don't know, if it was on the IMDb Top 250, it was good enough for me?
I got way too complicated about this.
Ooh, okay.
I could have made things easy on myself and just said, I'm going to pick my 5 favorite movies that happen to be on the IMDb Top 250. But given what is actually meant by the moniker IMDb Top 250 Cinephile, that didn't feel quite right. Because among other things, what nobody needs is, hey, you know what Mandy's hot take of the day is? You know what's a real great film? The Seventh Seal. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Nobody's here to hear that. And so what I did, to me, the essence of the IMDb Top 250, and also kind of the essence of the things that made Rob the human incarnation of the IMDb Top 250, is that it is kind of a populist celebration of good movies. And so the approach that I took to my top 5 was I looked for the times that I have stood with the normies against the film snobs. So these are 5 movies that I looked at the list and said, you know what? The general public is right on these. Like, these are movies that I think in general, there's one that I'm not too sure about, but these are movies that the film community, with a capital F and capital C, kind of has a tendency to poo-poo a little bit. Like, oh, they're overrated, or they're not that good, or or those are for whatever. Those are for my mother-in-law, things like that. That I'm gonna say, no, the normies are right about these. These are actually really great movies, and for reasons that we will get into once I reveal what they are.
I love that approach, Mandy. I took a similar approach, I think a less rigorous approach, perhaps.
Oh, this was not rigorous.
Well, okay. Less emotionally rigorous, perhaps. My approach, I mean, obviously, all of the movies on my list are in the IMDb Top 250, or at least the IMDb Top 250 as it was when I accessed it to do my research on September 26th, 2024, because it does change. I tried to kind of maintain something of a spread of genres. I don't know that I was successful in that. But in choosing my list from the kind of long list that I procured from looking through everything, I was constantly trying to push myself towards picking the more mainstream title, like the more normie title, like you were saying. Because I do think that the thing that I want to get from honoring Rob in this way is not being afraid to like the movies that people like, that a lot of people like, and that are kind of embarrassing to like if you're a member of the film community, or if you're on film Twitter or whatever. And I think 1 or 2 of my movies are slightly maybe like B tier to that, because my tastes do run a little that way. But I always try to push it more towards like movies that everyone agrees is like a classic or a very mainstream accepted title like that.
Excellent. I'm feeling a little on the spot. I'm the enemy in the story. I accept that role for myself. I think that to me at least, you sort of solved for the question of, am I talking about things that normies like just because we're talking about the IMDb Top 250? It's not like Satan Tango has not wormed its way into the IMDb Top 10 or anything like that.
There are a couple of things on the IMDb Top 250 that I looked at them and I was like, what the hell is that? So it's not totally mainstream.
It's not totally mainstream. And there's like a certain percentage of it that's Bollywood, and usually that percentage is around like 7 or 8 films, which is of course not a percentage. But I haven't seen any of those. I've seen pretty much all of the non-Bollywood films on the list. I did give myself one limitation, because as was pointed out, it is a very fungible list. Like, it changes all the damn time anytime a new movie pops out. Like, I happen to have the list in front of me right now. Not at all, because I started tweaking it when the two of you were talking, and I was feeling very self-conscious. But like, I feel like I ran into something that's like fairly new on the list. Now I can't find it again. But like, there's always like, what's the big new popcorn movie that like skyrocketed its way into like the top, 50 to 100 somehow. So I did Dune 2. That's the one I was thinking. Dune 2 at number 45 on this 30th of September. 2024. I did limit myself to films in the top 100 on the assumption that there would be a little bit less what's the word I'm looking for? Upheaval, but just that those would be a little bit more stable. Now, as I just said, I'm seeing Dune 2 at 45. That doesn't feel very stable to me.
Well, things tend to splash into the top 250 at really weirdly high positions, so that actually tracks with what I expect.
That's true. I remember, I think when The Dark Knight was like 2 days old, it was already like number 3. So
isn't it still number 3?
It's still really high. It's still number 3. It's number 3. So there you go. So I did limit myself to the top 100 just on the grounds that like those are films that will probably persist in being there much more than, for example, if I go to the bottom of this list again, as of the 30th of September, Scent of a Fucking Woman is not one of the 250 best movies of all time. What is wrong with these people?
Are you going to do this with the whole list now? Is this just going to be the podcast?
No.
Is Tim going through the list and just getting madder and madder?
I think I peaked. I don't think anything is going to be on this list that will make me madder than Scent of a Woman. Jesus H. Goddamn Christ. Anyway. So I'm focusing only actually on a top 5 of the top 100 as it stood in the day I did my research.
That makes sense. And to that end, I did try to focus on ones that were a decade old or more, like also trying to kind of
that happened automatically for me.
Yeah, that makes sense.
I only have one that is not in the top 100, but that was kind of by accident.
Okay.
That's just how things worked out. I tried to enforce another limiting principle on myself, which is that I tried to make it so that they had to be movies that I knew Rob liked.
Oh.
But that didn't work out because somebody didn't keep his Letterboxd super duper up to date.
No, not so much.
And so I kept running into movies that I was like, I know you've seen these.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And yet they are not here.
Yep.
So I threw that away.
No, that would have made sense. And I will say for me, it was within that top 100. It's basically my 5 favorite films from the top 100. I didn't try to otherwise make it in any way populist or sort of normie friendly.
You and I are not having any overlap.
Well, it's the top 2. It's again, there's not art cinema on this list. It's
you and I are not having any overlap.
Okay.
Well, I'm excited to see if there's overlap because I think there could be.
I will say. This was going to be a fucking super Japanese-ass list, so I have reduced the number of Japanese films on it, more or less by fiat. Otherwise, so we'll see. Maybe I'll get somewhere. So shall we kick this thing off?
Yes, we shall.
All right. Mandy, do you mind taking us off with your number 5?
I suppose. Let me remind myself what's on my list in its most recent incarnation. This was my top 8. Until about 3 hours ago because I had to make some last-minute cuts. And hopefully I don't decide in the middle of this episode that I need to go back on some of my cuts. So we're just going to go ahead and set number 5 in stone right now. So this is a movie that I saw on a first date.
Ooh.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember whether it was like my first date.
Ooh.
I don't think so. It came out in 2004, and I don't think that was the year of my first date. But it was an interesting date movie because I cried about half the time, and somehow the guy still wanted to go out on another date with me after that. But this is the Best Picture winner of, I guess that would be 2005. This is Clint Eastwood's $1 Million Baby, which, as of my last checking, is number 179 on the IMDb Top 250.
All right.
So this, for the 3 of you out there who have no idea what this movie is about, Clint Eastwood plays an old, bitter boxing coach who is estranged from his daughter and is looking for something to provide meaning in his life, and lo and behold, in wanders Hilary Swank, a very poor but very ambitious young trainee boxer who convinces Clint Eastwood's character to take her on as his new prodigy. And in the meantime, Morgan Freeman is in the background, providing lots of gravitas as Clint Eastwood's kind of assistant conscience Jiminy Cricket type figure, and also begging for somebody to finally give him an Oscar, goddammit. It worked.
It did.
It worked out.
It did indeed.
He did finally get his Oscar. I don't know that this is one that really gets crapped on by the film Twitter types. It seems more like a movie that just nobody really talks about anymore. And I think that's a shame because I genuinely love this movie. I find it very touching and heartwarming. I think Clint Eastwood is wonderful. I think Hilary Swank is wonderful. Just in general, I think there are wonderful performances here. I know it is emotionally manipulative as hell, especially at the end, and I do not care. I actually kind of love it when movies successfully emotionally manipulate me, even if they shouldn't be able to, and even if I understand exactly what they are doing. And maybe it is not doing anything that exciting cinematically, but again, I just kind of don't care. Because sometimes I just want to be punched in the heart over and over again by a movie. And this is one that does that.
I mean, as the sort of representative of pretentious film people type, I really like this movie a lot. I agree with all of the points you just made. In particular, I think that emotional manipulation's fine. It's what art does. The only difference between movies that we call manipulative and movies that we don't are that the movies that we say aren't manipulative are lying about it, is basically where I'm at.
Yeah, that's kind of true.
But I've always really liked this film. I think the film Twitter and Letterboxd folk, I think, have a very ambivalent and conflicted relationship with Clint Eastwood in general.
Well,
so I think that's I agree. But I think that just what sort of complicates, like, is this a film people crap on? I don't think it is. I think this is one of the Eastwood films.
Eastwood's other films, it is not one that people crap on.
That's kind of where I was at.
But the others that they crap on a lot more are, number one, not in the IMDb top 250, so I couldn't feature them. Though one of my taglines has become, "This is what happens when you Philistines don't go to see Richard Jewell," because I'm still bitter about what audiences did to that movie.
Such a good goddamn movie.
I know, and nobody saw it.
That should have made Paul Walker Hauser the biggest star in America. I swear to God.
And instead, he's stuck doing, like, grunts in Inside Out 2. And I'm so mad, but I'm supposed to be talking about $1 Million Baby, so I'm going to get over that now. But anyway, Clint Eastwood's great, and if I can manage to have uncomplicated, loving cinematic relationships with people like Mark Ruffalo and Boots Riley, you people can get over your dislike of Clint Eastwood's politics. That is my feeling on that matter. But regardless, it's a lovely movie, and like you said, emotional manipulation is a BS criticism of a film. This one is definitely doing that thing where it's like choreographing the exact moments that it wants you to cry. Mm-hmm. But it choreographs them really well. And I know that because on the occasions when I watch this movie, these are all, by the way, everything on my list is a movie that I have seen at least 5 times, and in some cases far more than 5 times. Every time I've watched this movie, I have cried at exactly the points Clint Eastwood wants me to cry.
Nice.
Well, that's excellent. And that's perfect top 250 material. Emotional manipulation, crying, well-known stars and filmmaker. That's perfect.
Big swelling music at exactly the right moments. You want to hug all your friends afterwards and cry about how good it was. Exactly. That is what the IMDb top 250 is made of.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is actually not a movie that I've seen. This kind of, I think it's safe to say it's a middle-brow drama, if that's kind of the bucket we're putting it in. This kind that kind of thing from the mid-2000s is a big blind spot for me. I was 10 when this movie came out, so I wasn't really rushing.
You were not old enough to be going on first dates.
Yeah, I wasn't rushing to see $1 Million Baby. So my one kind of encounter with it is the incredibly random parody of it that happens in either Scary Movie 3 or 4.
I beg your pardon?
Yeah, no, it happens. I believe it's Scary Movie 4, which is the worst of the two.
I didn't see any of the Scary movies after the first one.
I mean,
I will sincerely say you have not seen the best of the Scary movies.
Yeah, Scary Movie 3 is the best. I believe
as discussed recently on Bride of Alternate Ending in our episode on...
Oh, yeah.
What was that movie called?
In a Violent Nature? Oh, no, Shriek If You Know What I Did Last Friday the 13th. That's what it was.
I was going to say it was not In a Violent Nature because I listened to that one this morning
that makes
and I would have
sense.
remembered that digression.
No, that makes more sense that we would have not done it in that one. Anyway, I believe it's Scary Movie 4. There is an incredibly prolonged $1 Million Baby reference.
Okay.
I don't remember that at all, but I certainly feel
$1 Million Baby.
That's in bounds for that movie, I think.
That sure is a scary movie that I would expect a horror parody series to make fun of. Okay.
Yeah, sure. That's they were just...
I feel like horror parody was no longer part of the mission statement by the 4th one.
They'd lost their way, and they barely had it to begin with. Anyway, shall we do my number 5?
Yes.
Let's do your number 5.
My number 5, I'm starting high. Mine was number 29 when I accessed the list. It is a movie that I'm going to call by its original title because fuck everything that happened later. But it is 1977's Star Wars. But yes, the original George Lucas sci-fi fantasy. When we are talking about big, iconic movie franchise trilogies, I tend to go for the scrappier originals. And scrappy's a silly word to call a movie that's this splashy and expensive.
Star Wars is scrappy, and this is one of the things people don't realize. It is absolutely a scrappy movie. But
yes, okay, great.
Isn't this the one that has like potatoes and shoes for props? That's the definition of scrappy.
Yeah, and also there's a werewolf at the cantina. It's just a werewolf.
A werewolf at the cantina.
And there's Mark Hamill walking around being like, "I sure do love being in movies. Look at me."
Yeah. Anyway, so it's just like I tend to go for the scrappier original over the splashier, more beloved sequel. Like I love the original Evil Dead. I love the original Terminator, and I love the original Star Wars. I think it is this kind of efficient, effective, kind of go for broke myth making movie. Obviously, and kind of metatextually, it invented a form of cinema that, like it or not, kind of changed everything forever. And it exuberantly steals from the best of everything, like a lot of incredible films do. It steals from the best of fantasy, steals from the best of sci-fi, steals from the best of samurai movies. In one fell swoop, it gives us Carrie Fisher and Harrison Ford and Mark Hamill, and mileage may vary on those people, but I think giving us those three people is a very good thing to do. And that it's an incredible John Williams score. Will he give you better sub-themes later on? Maybe, but it's so good. It's just like, I think that it's the birth of this thing that's just like this titanic, overwhelming piece of cinema that you just can't look away from, but it is also this kind of scrappy, beautiful thing. And I think that you can't deny Star Wars. And I'm not a Star Wars franchise guy, but the original Star Wars, you got to give it its flowers, and I wanted to honor it on this list.
I would say, to your point about scrappiness versus polished sequels, I do like Empire better. I think it is a better film, and it's a film that I enjoy watching more. I think Star Wars is just so much more special. Like,
yes.
Like, if I could only keep one of them, it would 100% be Star Wars. Because it's just a very important movie, and Empire is just a really damn good sequel, and that's different.
Yeah. I respect Star Wars a lot more than I like it. I actually don't enjoy it all that much. I'm just not a Star Wars person. That is a thing that I made peace with about myself a long time ago. But I respect it an incredible amount, and I am very happy for it that it succeeded and became the thing that it did.
Yes, I mean, obviously, we know very well that you are a Star Trek person.
They're not actually mutually exclusive.
You can be both. Although I sometimes wonder if I'm still a Star Wars person, given that at this point I think I dislike more than half of the theatrically released features. So,
I mean, how many of the Star Trek films do you like?
But Star Trek is a TV franchise that happens to have some movies attached to it.
It's true, but in both the cases of Star Wars and Star Trek, an important part of being a fan is hating at least half of the published product.
That is fair. But yes. This is not a Star Trek podcast. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
Nope.
I will say my list no longer in any way, shape, or form resembles the list that I had 10 minutes ago. I'm very pleased to have finished revising it. So it's been a little tweaked. It is now, I would say, not so much the best films, although there's overlap, but my favorite films.
Okay.
From the top 250. Ranked in order of favoriteness.
Ooh, okay, I love that. So what's your number 5?
So you both sufficiently shamed me. So you mentioned there's such perfect transition here. One of the many things that George Lucas boldly, brazenly stole from in making Star Wars were the samurai films of Akira Kurosawa, such as currently number 22 on the IMDb Top 250. Seven Samurai from 1954, which I get probably sounds like I did not actually shift from best to favorite. I do really enjoy this movie. Anyone who knows me knows that the single thing I most enjoy complaining about in all of cinema is this movie was too long. And Seven Samurai is a movie that is 3.5 hours long. It subjectively, the experience of watching it to me feels like I have logged maybe 2 hours, probably less. It flies. This movie is so well paced. It's so exciting. It goes through just these huge swells of big, dumb guy emotions. You've got, your Seven Samurai feeling. Some of them are sad because their lives are coming to an end and they're old and decrepit. Some of them are lustful, younger drunks. So just like a whole lot of big feelings expressed through this kind of really operatic action-adventure mode, but it also stops to have like really great little beats with the people in the village that they're protecting and the samurai themselves. And it's, I think, also just a really good action movie. I think very few people who have ever made cinema have been better at staging fight scenes than Kurosawa, and this is, I think, his peak. I mean, give or take a Ron, which I don't believe tragically is in the top 100, so I could not count it. But
is it not?
I think it's in the
might not be in the
250.
top 100.
It is
Okay.
145.
Gotcha.
It is 145. So yeah, I think it's a fun movie. I think it's a movie that makes me really excited. It's a movie that makes me really sad, and it has this kind of perfectly ambivalent ending where after like a whole bunch of popcorn thrills, you suddenly feel a little twisted up at the end of it. And it's just beautiful. And that's the other thing that I need out of movies, is I need them to be real damn pretty. And this movie has some of the best compositions ever. It has many of the best compositions ever, because there's 3.5 hours of it, and that's a lot of time to play with. So yeah, that's basically it. This is, to me, just a really fun movie to watch. And again, so much fun that it makes me feel like 3.5 hours is time well spent. And there's just not that many films that I can say that of.
Yeah, I need to watch this movie again at some point, because I have not seen it in over a decade. And what I do remember about it is that 3.5 hours flew by. Like, I remember thinking this movie was very fun and accessible for a Japanese movie made in the 50s.
Yep. And I'd say going faster than they should is like a Kurosawa specialty. One of the films that I cut off my list because I was like, I have too many Japanese films on this list. Number 85, High and Low, which is a 1963 Kurosawa film. Also, 2.5 hours, so much shorter, but also just feels so much faster.
That's impressive, because 2.5 hour movies are longer than 3.5 hour movies.
It's
They
the
are.
worst running time. It's such a bad running time. Absolutely.
Yes, and again, this list is all about shaming me. I've not seen Seven Samurai, so I do apologize. I do need to get on that. Sorry,
That's
everybody.
It is, in fact, 3.5 hours that you have to find to spend.
Yeah, I
It's
don't
the
know where
best
they are.
3.5 hours you will spend. No, I get that. So, Mandy, do you have a number 4 for us?
I do have a number 4 for us. So, this is a movie to which I have an interesting relationship,
Ooh.
because I went to college and, in fact, for a brief time, lived in a house and shared a room with the son of the screenwriter of this movie.
Okay.
Okay.
We haven't talked in a while, but hey, Cullen, if you happen to be listening, get back in touch with me. It'd be good to talk to you. This is another movie that I would not, like, swear in a court of law gets poo-pooed all the time by all the film snobs, but I think it gets poo-pooed at least some of the time by a good number of them, which is a darn shame. I also suspect that this has fallen out of favor for some other very silly political reasons, and I'm curious if anybody has figured out what the movie is yet. But this is 1995's Mel Gibson showstopper Braveheart, which is currently number 80 on the IMDb Top 250. And Brennan is making faces at me.
I will have Brennan make some even more faces. For like 2 years of my life, this was my favorite movie of all time.
I respect that.
No, the face is at me because I haven't seen Braveheart.
Oh, wow.
I don't think you would. I think you would bounce off Braveheart, honestly.
Probably.
I don't
It's a
think
very boy
it would
movie.
be for you. It's a very boy movie.
And I don't really watch.
How much tolerance do you have for Mel Gibson doing his Mel Gibson thing for a really long time?
That's the thing. I mean, I have quietly watched the movies of canceled men. You know, like I don't really have a problem with it. I'm a cineast. I watch Rosemary's Baby periodically, and I
mean, yeah, it's great.
It's a great movie. You know, it just is what it is, and you know, you just gotta live with yourself, and it's just a thing you gotta do. But Braveheart is just not a movie that has particularly appealed to me, and that is the face that I was making. But also, Mel Gibson is just kind of a gross person to think about. But Braveheart is a separate thing from Mel Gibson, not necessarily.
It is and it isn't.
It is and it isn't. But like, Braveheart is Braveheart.
I wasn't even talking about Mel Gibson doing his real life Mel Gibson thing. I was talking about Mel Gibson doing his I am directing myself thing.
That is
Like,
interesting in and of itself. You know,
This to me is the most Mel Gibson movie in the same way that like Avatar: The Way of Water is the most James Cameron movie.
That is a good comparison. And as it turns out, the most Mel Gibson movie is a heck of a lot of fun, because this movie is just a playground for Mel Gibson.
It's a movie where you do have... Part of the buy-in is agreeing with Mel Gibson that violence is ennobling, I would say.
Yes. And again, for the 0 of you out there who don't know what Braveheart is about, but you know, I'm sure that number has to get rounded up somewhere. This is Mel Gibson's biopic, question mark. Does it even count as a biopic anymore when it is this loosely based on true facts?
I mean, it's not necessarily the least accurate biopic in the history of the cinema.
The Greatest
I'm sure we can
Showman
come
is
up
probably
with
less accurate.
Probably. I will say this. Braveheart is printing the legend. Greatest Showman is flat out lying.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. It is a Men Who Shot Liberty Valance type biopic. But in any case, it's the story as told through Mel Gibson of William Wallace and the fight for Scottish independence from the brutal King Edward Longshanks, which is a great name for a king, by the way. They used to know how to name him. Enough of this Charles III business. Give him a good nickname.
You gotta earn a nickname,
Charles
though.
Wrinkleface or something like that. I don't know. But in any case, this is another movie. I don't remember how long it is, but it's quite long.
It's not quite 3. It is barely not 3.
It is in the realm of the worst runtime.
If you called it 3, no one would say you were wrong.
Back when you had to rent it on VHS from Blockbuster, it was 2 VHS
There
tapes.
were for sure 2 tapes. I remember very distinctly where the tape break happened because I watched this film a ton when I was a teenager.
But yeah, this is definitely a movie about how violence is ennobling. And for however long this movie goes on, yeah, I am willing to buy that. Because again, this movie is a playground. It is a heck of a lot of fun. Before Randall Wallace, the screenwriter, kind of lost his way. Sorry, old college friend. in the 21st century, he was very good at schmaltz, and this is what I like to think of sometimes as elevated schmaltz. Like, not in the same way that elevated horror is, but it is schmaltz in the service of something very grand. And I think they actually do a good job at making this thing very grand. The blue Braveheart face paint has become iconic for a good reason. Mel Gibson screaming freedom on his execution block has become iconic for a good reason. These things have all been parodied within a millimeter of their lives for very good reason. And that is because this is a great movie, and people loved it for good reasons.
Yeah, I mean, I love the scale of it. I love the quality of the action directing. Here's my hot take. This is the movie the Lord of the Rings films want to be when they are doing their sword fight action scenes. This is the same thing but better than the Lord of the Rings trilogy, in my opinion.
This is also the movie that I'm like, why would I ever watch Gladiator in a world where this exists?
Because this is Gladiator. It is like exactly Gladiator.
Except that Gladiator is really dour and plotty and boring.
And this has Mel Gibson making a soap opera.
Exactly.
It's great. No, I'm a fan. I'm sadly an unreformed Mel Gibson as director fan. I don't actually always love him as an actor, but I do think he has a pretty good hit rate as director, to such a degree that my most embarrassing confession I could imagine making on this or any podcast, I'm like super excited for The Passion of the Christ 2. Like I'm looking forward to it.
Wait, is that
I'll
happening?
see it in theaters.
It is happening. It's like a film version of The Harrowing of Hell.
That's gonna be awesome.
What the fuck?
It's gonna be so good.
Oh, okay.
It's such a weird idea for a movie.
Is Jesus gonna punch a woman in the face like Nick Cage in bear suit style? Because Satan was played by a woman in The Passion of the Christ.
I just don't know what to even remotely expect from this project. It's not even shooting. It's shooting next spring, I think. So we'll be getting it like 2026.
I demand it start shooting right now.
Well, he has that
soon enough. Good things come to those who wait.
Mark Wahlberg plane movie coming out in like a week or whatever.
He has that random movie, and he has an even more random, like, Mel Gibson is the crusty old neighbor in The Sandlot coming out like next month.
Yeah, he's been busy.
But enough about good old Mel. Do you have a number 4 for us, Brennan?
I do. I did not limit myself to the 100. Mine is number 146. I'm also in the current century now. It is the 2006 Spanish language movie Pan's Labyrinth, an early Guillermo del Toro pick. I find it to be his joint masterpiece with The Devil's Backbone. I think those movies are kind of inextricably linked in my mind, and I wouldn't want to place one over the other one. But I find it to be as exquisite a work of imagination as there has ever been, perhaps. And in 2006, no less, one of the worst times for imagination on screen. And it's this beautiful. I mean, I guess this is probably the least mainstream pick on my list, and it's a pretty mainstream movie at this point. But obviously it's about a little girl who is basically entering this fantasy world during the Spanish Civil War. I don't know. The plot doesn't really matter. I don't even want to. Why did I bother?
It's Alice in Wonderland.
Yeah,
So I did the plot for you.
Exactly. But it just combines these beautiful, disturbing fantasy grotesques with this hyper real, disgusting world of war around this little girl, and it is just this. It is a movie designed to bowl you over. Both with the real and the unreal, and it's this wonderful dance between the two things, and I think it's a pure work of cinema, and I really love to dip into it whenever I can, and it's one of the movies that brought us Doug Jones at the peak of his powers.
It is the Doug Jonesiest movie.
My love for Doug Jones knows no bounds, so I am there especially for that.
Oh yeah,
and I would agree with you, Brennan. I do sort of have this, arm in arm with Devil's Backbone as sort of the joint best Guillermo del Toro film, and sort of still the only Guillermo del Toro film that I don't vaguely dislike myself for having ever been a big fan of. But really, really extraordinary movie. Just no two ways about it. And I feel it's a great example of an IMDb Top 250 film because it's such a, I don't mean this in a dismissive way. It's such an entry-level foreign film, but in the way that it's not just I like a foreign film. It is called Pan's Labyrinth, but it gets you excited to see what else there is like this, and I think that's one of the actually genuinely good functions of a list like the IMDb Top 250 is to give you same with Seven Samurai, right? It gives you the baby food version of this wild and woolly thing that is foreign art cinema. And that's necessary, I think.
Yeah, or at least it's the kind of catalyst. It gives you a spark. It jolts you with the cattle prod to be invested in a whole culture that you might not have been involved in before.
Exactly.
And I was gonna say, Tim, I know what you mean, but hearing this described as the baby food version of anything is a little bit jarring to me because Pan's Labyrinth left me feeling like I'd been reamed out with a hoe.
I mean, keep in mind, I've already read into the record that Satan Tango is proper cinema to me. So I should see if Satan Tango's on this list. I'm sure
it's not. Checked on
Damn
your
it.
benefit. For your benefit.
I wonder if Workmaster Harmonies is.
I don't think so.
No Bellatar on the top 250. Shock of shocks. Mm-hmm. It is on the top 250, though.
Okay.
And having just talked about the baby food version of art cinema and all of this, I'm just going to go for the most Hollywood movie. Literally the most Hollywood movie that exists in the entire world at number 88 at this point in time on the IMDb Top 250. That would be 1952's Singin' in the Rain, which, to coin a phrase from Mandy, for the zero of you who don't know what Singin' in the Rain is about, once upon a time there was a magical land called Classical Hollywood, and once they didn't talk in the movies, and then they did talk in the movies. And that was a little bit of a difficult time for them because not everyone could talk all that well, but the ones who could talk really well then got to sing. And then we had the purest version of art ever made, which is the Hollywood musical. And this is the purest Hollywood musical. This is MGM Freed Unit musical filmmaking at its absolute height. Fake ass sets with totally artificial people singing and dancing their hearts out, and it is just joy juice to me. Seeing Gene Kelly singing in the rain, as he says, just spinning in circles and making splashy puddles, and he's doing it in time to music. That is why cinema, to me, is to have that sort of thing in it. Just a great, funny love story that's a huge love letter to cinema and filmmaking. As a popular art, right? Not some sort of filmmaking as the art form, but just filmmaking as the thing that we do because people love it and they love us for making it. And it's gorgeously colored, one of my favorite Technicolor movies. I don't know, Singing in the Rain. It feels like the most basic choice on my list because it's just so perfect and good, and everyone who's ever seen it loves it. This is the musical for people who think they don't like musicals, or even if they know they don't like musicals. This is still the musical for them, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it, like you were saying with Pan's Labyrinth being a kind of good intro to foreign cinema, Singing in the Rain both is a good intro to musicals, but it also, because it's a period piece about Hollywood, it's a good intro into the thing that silent cinema was and that early sound cinema was. It's a very good intro to just early Hollywood in general.
I think it's a good intro to silent cinema, but it's also a good intro to like 50s cinema.
Yeah, it kind of covers the gamut. You're right. It is such a blast. It's very, very fun. Obviously, a lot of people, again, at the height of their powers. Personally, I get a little bored by the dream ballet in this one.
People say that, and I respect people's rights to have opinions that I disagree with.
Obviously, there are other dream kind of spaces in this one, because Make 'Em Laugh is kind of a dream, like a nether space in Singing in the Rain, right? Yeah, and that kind of stuff I'm all in on, but the dream ballet, I think, gets a little long on the tooth for me. But it is a very, very
counterpoint
excellent movie. Yes.
Counterpoint,
Okay.
Brennan. Sid Charisse's emerald green dress.
That is a great counterpoint.
I feel like I
We'll
have
accept it into the record.
Thank you.
This was a movie that was on my long list for this episode, and it was one of the ones that I cut for being like, does the world really need Mandy's hot take on Singing in the Rain and how it's really good? Like, I don't really have anything
Maybe
to
it
add
does.
on this matter.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I feel like this is not the hot takes episode. This is the movie we all know
No,
is
but
good
it's more
is
just
good
like, what does
episode.
Singing in the Rain need me to say about it?
Yeah, sometimes
That
it's hard
is
to...
fair. That is
Yeah,
fair.
when Tim brought it up, that's the same kind of quandary I found myself in, where it's like, oh, I love Singing in the Rain. What do you say about Singing in the Rain? What's there to say? But yeah, no, it's a great, excellent pick, Tim. Congratulations.
Very good.
Thank you. I appreciate your congratulations.
And I'm glad that we were so joyful and unified on that one, because I'm about to throw a big ol' wedge into this party. I know that for a fact.
Oh.
Because we're going to talk about one of Tim's favorite movies now.
Okay, I'm ready.
All right, so this was a movie. No, I haven't been exclusively in the 90s yet. We actually had just moved back to the 90s, but this is a movie that came out in the good old 90s, and it won some very deserved Oscars. And everybody loved it for a little while, and then everybody kind of turned on it after that. And by everybody, since it's still at number 26 in the IMDb Top 250, I don't actually mean... These, by the way, are ranked by their ranking on the IMDb Top 250. This is probably my least favorite movie on the list, but it is also the one that I am proudest of having on this list. So yes, currently it is number 26. And by everybody turned on it, I mostly mean like people who talk about movies on the internet turned on it, because that's what we mean by everybody at this point. And those people, as it turns out, are wrong about said movie, because this is an absolutely gorgeous, sentimental piece about the lengths that parents will go to protect their children from the terrible things that are happening to them.
I was wrong.
This is... oh God, is it 97 or 98?
It's 1997.
This is 1997's La Vita è Bella, or Life is Beautiful.
I thought I knew where you were going, and I had literally already written Forrest Gump down on my, list.
I haven't seen Forrest Gump.
Well, it is all the things you
Really?
just said, and that it won awards and people with good taste think it's a piece of shit. By which I mean me.
Were these both on your list of movies that you hate that everybody else loves? I think they were.
That's entirely possible.
I think that both of these were, but in any
I'm
case...
not sure if I'm willing to concede that everybody loves Life is Beautiful, honestly. But maybe you're right.
Yeah,
Maybe
definitely
I don't
at
remember
this
that
point,
episode.
not everybody loves Life is Beautiful, because I always find myself in the position of going, no, the rest of you are wrong about this movie and about Roberto Benigni and all the other things that you feel the need to opine on. So this is one that maybe actually a few people at this point don't know what it's about. So this is about Roberto Benigni playing himself, except in this case, himself has been transported back in time to Italy at the dawn of the Second World War. And it's kind of a movie divided into two parts. The first is about his character Guido's attempts that are eventually successful to court his future wife, Dora, who is played by Benigni's real-life wife, Nicoletta Braschi. Then in the second half, the movie, which I will say is too long, but most movies are too long, It's very suddenly transitions to the Holocaust is upon us and Jews are being transported to camps. And at this point, Guido and Dora have a beautiful little son, Josue, who is, because he has a Jewish father, transported to the camps along with his parents. And the remainder of the film is about this clownish figure, because of course he's played by Roberto Benigni, so he is of course a clown, and his attempts to hide from his son what is really going on. So the gravitas and seriousness of what is actually going on in the camps. The criticism that one always hears of this movie, that again is wrong, is that Benigni is making light of the Holocaust, or joking about the Holocaust, or something Holocaust, and that is absolutely not what he is doing here. This is, again, a movie about the absolutely stupid things that parents will do for the benefit of and to protect their children. And especially since I became a parent, that sort of thing just grabs my heart and yanks it out of my chest, Mola Ram style. So Benigni is manipulating me successfully here in a way that he might not be successfully manipulating everybody. But I have always found myself incredibly moved by his performance, and like the first half's a little bit slow, though I do think the courtship between the two of them is adorable, and Benigni does actually have really good chemistry with his real life wife when the two of them are on screen together, which is probably why they perform in so many movies together. But then I think he navigates the tone shift very successfully into the second half, to the point where it is genuinely funny. Like, I do laugh when I watch the second half of the movie, again, because and I know this is again where you and I differ, Tim, I find Roberto Benigni to be a very funny and charming performer. But then as things get worse and worse and his attempts to hide them from Josue become more and more desperate, even though I know how the movie turns out, it's one of those movies where I am always hoping that it will end differently this time. Because of course he dies at the end. The kid lives, but he dies. And I'm always hoping that he will make it out by the end. And to me, that's the sign, in many ways, of, like, a good, in this case, tragicomedy, but also tragedy, is that no matter how many times I experience it, I find myself hoping that this time they'll do different things and everything will go differently. So I love this movie a lot, is what I'm saying.
I respect that, and I will certainly say if our good friend Rob Jarosinski was here today, he would side with you. I think we can certainly agree if he's seen the movie, which I think he had.
I know that Carrie had, but I think this was one of the ones where I couldn't determine a Letterboxd rating from him. But again, like, this is a parent movie. Like, I am only one parent, and I don't want to speak for all parents, but I feel like you can't watch this movie once you have a kid and not let it hit you a little bit.
Okay, that's fair. And I will say, it is not the Italian movie about an adorable child that I find most nettlesome from the IMDb Top 100. So
is that Cinema Paradiso?
That would be Cinema Paradiso. Which, I was thinking about this a few days ago. I don't remember why Cinema Paradiso came up. Might be my least favorite movie.
Oh.
Wow.
Potentially. I would need to contemplate that. Like, the film whose existence annoys me the most. But that's not what we're here to talk about, unless that happens to be what's next on your list, Brennan.
Cinema Paradiso is not on my list.
Have you seen Life is Beautiful, Brennan?
I have not seen Life is Beautiful, but I do appreciate that, Mandy, you're really embracing kind of like naked sentiment on your list. I think that's something that...
I'm a very sentimental person, and I love movies that cater to sentimental people because of that.
I think that is beautiful, and I think that's something that the IMDb 250 kind of does embrace. I think that's something that cinema does really well, just in general. But yeah, I have not seen the movie, unfortunately. I feel like such a rube in this conversation, which is funny because we're trying to... Yeah?
I don't feel like I have a good sense of whether or not you would like this. I'm kind of leaning towards no. I think you would probably get bored by it, but I'm not positive.
I don't know. I don't know. I can do... You'd be surprised what, like, a pared down... nakedly sentimental drama can do for me. Like, I really like Bent, if we're talking about, like, specifically Holocaust dramas.
Okay, there might be hope for you on this one then.
Yeah, so I don't know. But yeah, anyway, so I can't say I'm going to rush out and go see Life is Beautiful. But it's one I'd at least be curious about what my reaction would be to it, especially considering the differing polls we have on the podcast here.
I consider myself something of a Roberto Benigni connoisseur.
I am fully aware
well,
of this,
so.
Considering your Discord handle, at least what it was for a long time.
Did I? Oh, I did have something about him in my Discord handle.
Wasn't it Benigni apologist for a very long time?
It was Benigni apologist, yes, and it became that because we were arguing about Life is Beautiful in the Discord.
That sounds exactly right.
I need to ask one question. What do you feel about the Benigni Pinocchio?
It's terrible.
Okay, good. As long as
unbelievably
as long
terrible.
as there is some quantity of sanity rattling around in your brain, that's all I need.
That was a tremendously misguided movie.
Okay, good.
In which he took all of the goodwill that he had built up with Life is Beautiful and his other films and just flushed it down the crapper.
in a literally measurable way did that thing, yes.
Yes.
So.
Anyway,
Brennan.
This is my number 3, right?
It is.
We're sticking around in the 90s. Mine is number 141. I'm actually only moving 5 slots up from Pan's Labyrinth. We are going to 1993 for Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. It is basically a perfect movie. Most of the things that people complain about, I don't give a shit about what they have to say. Lexi and Tim, I don't care. I don't mind them. They're fine. They're not good, but they don't ruin the movie for me. If anything, the person that I dislike the most in the movie, for my own reasons, is Jeff Goldblum, because I find his very ticky performances really, really annoying. But I think he acquits himself totally fine in Jurassic Park. But that is a totally separate thing. But anyway, again, we got more John Williams just being excellent at the thing that he does, which is also... John Williams is littered across the IMDb 250 because he is the perfect person for just like populist popcorn cinema. This is a movie where Steven Spielberg knows exactly what he has and how to use it. It's gloriously unsubtle visual storytelling, and I love it. I'm a big dummy. I like being told what I'm looking at and how to look at it. There's DNA projected onto a T-Rex's face, or maybe it's a velociraptor. It's one of the dinosaurs.
It's a velociraptor. It's a great scene.
Yeah, it's a great scene. It's just great. It's thrilling. It's larger than life, but it's also got these. It's this motley crew of weirdos that are thrust into this world, this big blockbuster movie. It's not all of these like pretty like CW kind of movie star characters. It's this kind of character actor people, and they're like Laura Dern and Sam Neill are pretty perfect, and you've got this like totally random ensemble cast of pretty incredible people. You've got Wayne Knight, Samuel L. Jackson, B.D. Wong, Richard Attenborough. Like, it's a really incredible cast of people. It's a really exhilarating movie. I love Jurassic Park. It's one of my favorite movies. It's a great time. I don't know. I don't know what to say. It's Jurassic Park.
Even just listening to you talk about it is making me smile a lot.
Right?
I have to say, I in a way feel more antagonized by hearing you describe the movie with Lex and Tim as basically perfect than I was hearing Mandy at least concede that it is her own private relationship to the world that causes her to life is beautiful. But everything you said other than that is true. Really wonderful movie. I had an experience about a month and a half ago. I was standing in a restaurant where, for reasons that remain unclear to me, they couldn't get orders placed for like an hour. So I was standing there like just 40 minutes waiting for them to bring me my damn sandwich, and they had Jurassic Park playing on one of the TVs over the bar, and it was silent, and I still just sat there like swept away by Jurassic Park, in part because I could fill in the gaps because I've seen the movie a trillion times. Mm-hmm. I know the dialogue, but like just seeing the pantomime version of Jurassic Park was just like such a compelling experience because it is all those things.
Here's the thing, silent might actually not be the worst way to watch this movie, because while you do miss out on the John Williams score, and that is tragic, though honestly we can all just like hum it at this point at the right moments, you at least then don't have to listen to Sam Neill and Laura Dern mumbling all their lines. Just shut up and let the dinosaurs talk.
That's fair.
All
no,
you
the dinosaurs
two
don't
need to
talk
do is
until
make
Jurassic
goo-goo
Park
eyes
3,
at the dinosaurs.
Mandy.
Doesn't matter. They make noises.
Yeah,
They
they
make
do.
big old like grunts and groans and shrieks. Let the dinosaurs make noise, and the two of you shush and just make googly eyes at them.
Yeah, and obviously,
But you don't even like they do move in herds. The finest line of dialogue from 90s popcorn cinema.
It's so good.
It's fine. It's
It's
the
so
mumbling.
good.
It's so good. Oh my god.
It's the mumbling that I can't stand. The lines that
Fair
I can
enough.
actually understand are fine. It's just that,
Fair.
especially Laura Dern is such a marble mouth.
Again,
It's fine. It's a
not
great
an
movie.
issue I have with Jurassic Park, but yes, no, it's a great time. Also, I mean, obviously, I mean, you know, Steven Spielberg really figured out how to make 1993 CGI work in a way that nobody did. Like, it is a movie that genuinely holds up
We
in so
haven't
many
caught
ways.
up to this movie.
It still looks so good.
It's 31 years later, and people are still making mistakes that this movie solved.
Yeah,
It's
no,
insane.
It's absolutely wild. It's infuriating to look at people just making the same mistakes over and over again, and in ways that this movie is just like so perfect. But anyway, Jurassic Park. There you go.
This is a picture. It's a good picture.
Such a great
I feel
movie.
like you said about Singing in the Rain. Like, I don't know, what am I supposed to fucking say about Jurassic Park?
Yeah,
I don't know,
exactly.
I feel like you did a pretty good job.
But yes, so I will go to my number 3 then, if we're okay.
Yeah.
Unless anyone has any more burning thoughts about Jurassic Park. And I want to challenge, you know, you mentioned, Mandy, that some people like sentiment and some do not. I like sentiment. I like sentiment a lot. It just has to be the right kind of sentiment. And I have in my number 3 slot the film with, I think, the most sentimental moment in the entire history of the medium.
Oh.
It is at the end of 87 minutes of watching a charming little idiot bumblefuck his way across a nondescript urban environment trying to make enough money to help a woman afford life-saving surgery or life-altering surgery.
Oh, people listening
and then-
can't see my face, but I know what he's talking about.
And spoiler alert for the 1931 Charlie Chaplin film City Lights, but if you know anything about this film, you know how it ends. He succeeds. He gets the money and he gives it to her, and now this blind flower girl can see. And at the end of the movie, she encounters this little hobo, and she thinks, haha, what a funny looking little guy, and gives him a flower, and then realizes, while he's kind of staring at her, being awestruck that she can see, realizes that this is the little weird guy who's been trying to help her for the entire movie, and it just ends on this moment of her recognizing him and him recognizing her and holding the flower up to his mouth. And in literally my favorite close-up in all of cinema is Chaplin holding the flower to his face in City Lights. But yeah, City Lights, a funny movie until it becomes the most ungodly, heartbreaking thing ever in the world. And I will say, I think especially appropriate for this episode, because if my memory serves, I do believe Rob saw this, and I do believe this was kind of a wow, silent movies can actually be really, really fun moment for him. And so they can, and they are, and this movie is great because it's City Lights. I don't know. It is one of the agreed upon canonical masterpieces of all cinema, and it just makes me feel so good. Any thoughts?
I will say again, I'm a big Rube here. I've not seen City Lights.
this is one you should rush out and see.
Yes, it is. I have a copy. It's on my giant stack of unwatched movies that I'm working my way through. I will say Modern Times is on my long list of movies that I was considering for this list, but opted to not include because I was trying to push a little more mainstream.
Charlie Chaplin was the biggest movie star of his age. How is he not mainstream?
It didn't feel of the spirit of IMDb 250 to me in a way that City Lights does.
Fair, okay.
But yes, I know that I need to see this, and you're right. Like, in terms of like accessible silent cinema, Charlie Chaplin is maybe the person.
If it's not him, it's Keaton.
Yeah.
Although I don't think Keaton has anything on the top 250. And no, he does. He has The General and Sherlock Jr. 199 and 200. How about that? Whereas Modern Times is 50 and City Lights is 55. So Chaplin is certainly, and Gold Rush is 195. So Chaplin is better represented and higher than Keaton.
That is not surprising. I don't think Buster Keaton is a name that I think obviously Charlie Chaplin is a name that more people know. Robert Downey Jr. didn't play Buster Keaton, you know, in a movie. But Mandy, what do you have to say about City Lights?
I'm not going to say too much about City Lights, because if I do, I'm going to cry, and I need to save that for later.
Sure, absolutely.
Okay.
Well,
everything Tim said is correct.
Well, thank you. I'm glad we can be on the same page. That brings us through our top 3 through 5. We have our top 1 and 2 remaining, but as we would ordinarily take a break at this moment, I think this would be an appropriate time for us to share some thoughts from fans of the site, fans of Rob, and listen to some tributes that people have to say.
This is a testimonial sent to us by Brian Fowler. Rob built a community that I've found peace and joy in through a love of movies, but even more, a love of life. Rob was a person who decided what he wanted to do and be, and he went and did it and became it, and in the wake of that, he built the community around Alternate Ending. I can't claim to have known him particularly well, but over the past 7 or 8 years, he nevertheless had a positive impact on my life. I don't know the right way to say this. I'll miss you, Rob.
Hi everyone, this is Caleb. I'm lucky enough to have been a friend of Rob's, a guy with a real gift for making friends. Since you're listening to this, I don't have to tell you how much I enjoyed hearing Rob's voice, his warmth, and enthusiasm on Alternate Ending for all these years. We met in person for the first time after I got involved as a producer on one of his movie projects, so I had the honor of watching him work, too. The way Rob carried the dream of making movies with him all those years and then brought it to life, it's inspiring. His passion was infectious. He made you believe in his dream, and then he brought all the people together to make that dream a reality. Rob was a dreamer and a doer. That's a rare, special thing. Like everyone who knew Rob, I miss him.
Hello, this is Gavin McDowell, sometime contributor to Alternate Ending. This is my first time speaking in any capacity for an alternate ending thing. So I've been told many times from my dad I have a face for radio, but not the voice for it, apparently. My predominant memory of Rob was one of his many failed experiences in trying to shake up the website about 4 years ago, where he wanted to have conversations with us among the warring triad with random commentators, us in the columns. And I showed up to one of these, I believe it was about The Rock, maybe 15 minutes too early when Rob was doing sound checks and things of that sort. And he said, "Hey, Gavin," like I was his buddy. I mean, I am his buddy, but I had never met Rob in real life. He'd never seen me. He probably didn't know that much about me at that point. And it's just his capacity to make all of us weirdos feel like we know each other, even though we've met very few of each other in real life. I think that was really what made him special. And as minor as that interaction was, it's my enduring memory.
The first time I really spoke to Rob one-on-one was during a Zoom call in 2020. I'd invited him to chat about The Matrix, and the first thing I noticed at the start of the call was that he'd changed his backdrop to the lines of cascading green code. It was a little gesture, but I remember really appreciating it at the time. That's how I thought of Rob, as being a font of positive energy and encouragement, always yes-anding the people around him. I'll miss that.
This testimonial comes to us from MC Stefan. Rob's passion for film may have been the spark that formed this community, but if you listen to any episode of the Alternate Ending podcast that he hosted, you won't just hear his love of watching movies. Whether it's an update about his work as a film producer, a burst of impish banter with Carrie and Tim, or a giddy story about the time he shanghaied his family into filming a commercial for an HVAC repair company, in every pod you'll hear Rob's boundless optimism, his inspiring commitment to pursuing his dreams and empowering others to pursue theirs, and most of all, the profound gratitude and generosity he had for his fans, his friends, and his family. I'm so grateful for this community Rob led and the countless hours of hilarious conversations he shared with us. As I've grappled with this loss, they have reminded me to try to move through life with the same warm, hopeful spirit that he did.
Thanks to everyone for sharing your thoughts. We're going to have a few more tributes to Rob at the end of the episode, so be sure to stick around for those. In the meantime, we still have our top 2 films from the IMDb Top 250 to go. So let's kick things back to Mandy. Mandy, what is your number 2?
All right, so this is the one where I broke my rule, because I think this one's held in pretty high esteem by, well, it's number 20 on the top 250, so I'm going to say just about everybody out there. But this is the one that I picked for Rob especially, because I currently have my phone open to Rob's Letterboxd profile, and I'm looking at his top 4, his Letterboxd top 4. And of those 4 films, 3 of them I would describe as 3 of the most head-up own-ass movies in the history of movies. And then there's the 4th one, which I absolutely adore. Back when it was basically just Rob and Carrie and Tim doing the podcast, Rob was probably the one that I overlapped the least with most of the time. Like, not a dig at him or anything, just like people have different tastes, and his and mine overlapped the least of you 3. But when I overlapped with Rob, I really overlapped with Rob. Like, I did not like a lot of the same movies that he liked, but I loved many of the same movies that he loved.
Sure.
And so this is one of those, and this is again, I really should have double-checked the years on these, but this is the David Fincher movie Seven.
That's 1995.
1995. I really am just stuck in the 90s here, and we're going to stay stuck in the
but
90s.
But that's where Rob would want us to be stuck.
In the 90s, yeah, he really would. Yes, so I have absolutely no time at all for David Fincher's other big magnum opus, Fight Club, which is one of the other 3 in Rob's Letterboxd top 4. But for a movie that basically leaves me feeling miserable and like, what is the point of anything anytime I watch it, this is a shockingly accessible and rewatchable movie. So this is another one that for the very, very few that I'm almost comfortable rounding down to 0 out there who don't know what it's about, Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are police detectives. Brad Pitt is like the young, idealistic detective who still believes in the good of the system and of the world, and then Morgan Freeman is the old, jaded police detective. I'm noticing a pattern of sorts on my list involving Morgan Freeman. So Morgan Freeman is the old, jaded police detective who believes in none of those things and is working on this one last case before he retires. And they are out to catch a serial killer who has been committing a series of gruesome murders that are heavily staged and based on the 7 deadly sins. And the objective, of course, is always to catch him before he kills again, and just spoilers, they never do manage to catch him before he kills again. Well, I guess they kind of do, but they don't
kind of do and they kind of don't.
They don't prevent any of the 7 deadly sins murders, let's put it that way. This is an incredible movie watching experience. It always feels weird saying that it has some of the most incredible on-screen murders, I think, that I have ever seen. Like, you don't actually see the murders, you just see the aftermaths of the murders. And they really are just put together like paintings. Not even like moving paintings. They're just tableau, incredibly gruesome tableau. The most famous one, of course, is the sloth murder, in which an extremely underweight man plays a generally nasty piece of work is agreed upon, who was chosen to be the sloth murder victim and has just been imprisoned in a bed for, I want to say, like a year or a year and a day or some time frame like that, and just left to rot away. And I think when they come in, everybody thinks that he's dead, and then it turns out that he's not actually dead yet. He will be very, very soon, but when they find him, he is horrifyingly not yet dead. But I've also always had kind of a fondness for the gluttony murder, which is the first one in the film, because it is so gross that I think it actually kind of wraps around to being beautiful again. Like it's a slimy, gruesome, livid, goopy kind of beauty, but there's beauty to be found in that sort of thing too, as anybody who has ever watched an Italian cannibal movie knows full well. And I feel like it's speaking to that part of me in that moment. Brad Pitt and Morgan Freeman are both very good, very watchable. Once again, I feel like, canceled men is a theme of my list as well. But I know how everyone feels about Kevin Spacey, and let us be totally honest, I do not care what he did or did not do. He is brilliant in this film. in his role that was not heavily publicized when it was released because, spoiler alert, Kevin Spacey is the killer. Kevin Casey is the spiller, apparently.
Yes.
But this is one of those movies that I feel like doesn't really need me to speak for it because it is a movie that has been talked and analyzed to death. Its visuals have been analyzed to death, but it is a movie that feels like it should be very difficult to love and yet is not, at least not for me. I've seen it a million times. I'll probably see it a million more. And I feel like listening to Rob talk about this movie or reading something Rob had written about this movie was one of the first experiences that I had connecting to Rob and being just like, yes, he gets it about a movie like this. And those didn't happen all that often, but when they did, they felt really special, and now I guess they feel even more special.
Sure.
So that's 7. This is one that if you haven't seen, Brennan, you should also go out and see.
You've seen 7.
I have not seen 7.
You fuck.
We should see 7.
How? You watch you've seen like slasher movies from like Jakarta in 1965. How have you not seen
very accurate.
7?
Aren't they all from the 80s though?
Yeah, they're mainly from the 80s, but
Seven's from the 90s.
I've seen 7's from the 90s. 90s. I don't know. It's just one that I haven't. I don't know. Here's the thing.
It's like gross horror slashery cannibal Italian type movie, like at its most close approach to the mainstream. This is like an actually important film for you to see.
I know, but see, here's the thing. The mainstream and I don't tend to get along that often. And I know this is a movie that I need to see, but I tend to go straight for the cult stuff. Do not pass go. Do not collect $200. So again, the 90s and the 2000s, like the big movies, are not my wheelhouse in terms of like, I do have some big blind spots still that I'm working to fill. But yeah, so when Mandy had said there are 4, I was looking at Rob's 4 Letterboxd picks. I've seen 3 of them, and I have not seen 7.
I do feel the need to say, in reference to those 3 other films, Fight Club, Inception, and The Matrix, somehow, and this is how much Rob was the human IMDb top 220, top 250, top 220. As you point out, Mandy, 7 is the 20th film on the IMDb at this current moment. It is the lowest rated of Rob's 4 movies.
Yep. And David Fincher directed 2 of them. Yeah. No, it's a wild thing, and I'm aware I need to see 7, but again, like, it's just one of those things. Like, I was 1 when it came out, and again, I wasn't rushing to the theater.
I was probably too young to see 7.
Fair.
Yeah, and I'm someone who very much believes in working to see movies that came out before you were born. But the stuff that came out immediately after you were born is kind of less important to me.
That's fair. That's fair.
So again, that's just a bit of a blind spot, but I will work on it. I do promise. But yes, Tim, what are your thoughts on 7?
I will say, unlike Life is Beautiful or Braveheart, this is a movie that I will very confidently say, Brennan, you will like.
Okay, great. I love that.
Or you will at least feel like it was more than worth your time to see it.
Yes, I feel the same way. I know the beats of 7. I know the thing that 7 is, but I do feel like seeing it will offer more than I feel like it will. Like I feel like
yeah. No, this is a fantastic movie. I also, Mandy, only really have time for a very small slice of Fincher's oeuvre, and it's this and Zodiac are basically the only 2 that I actually
And I haven't seen Zodiac. I have in fact resisted seeing it because I have time for such a small slice of...
Because it's 2 hours and 40
There's
minutes.
also that, and that is within
really
the worst
gross running time. It is a gross running time. But no, 7, great film. I personally do like Gluttony the most, but I think Sloth is an excellent choice as well.
I said I liked Gluttony the most. Sloth is just the famous one.
Oh, did you? Oh, okay. I misunderstood.
Okay, I'm also a fan of Lust, even though it's short. But it's so... It leaves so much to the imagination in such a good way.
Indeed. So, Brennan, out of the apparently 7 movies that you've ever seen, you've named 3 of them so far.
Yeah, well, I mean, my argument for seeing movies that came out shortly after I was born is about to be shattered because this one's from 1999. But it's number 144 on the list. It is M. Night Shyamalan's The Sixth Sense. This is a movie that's like maybe a little embarrassing to love as much as I love, but I love it so goddamn much. It's one of the core movies that made me a horror fan. I think it is one of, I think it's incontestably M. Night Shyamalan's masterpiece. I don't know that
I would feel disturbed by someone who wanted to really throw down for one of the
I was like,
others. It's like, no, fuck you, old is better than The
I
Sixth
guess it
Sense.
depends on what one means by masterpiece, I suppose.
Okay, that's fair. That's fair.
yeah, I mean, The Happening's a masterpiece in a very
Yes.
different way.
In a very different register, yes.
But I think The Sixth Sense is genuinely scary in a lot of different places, and that's not even the thing that it's really focused on doing. But when it does it does it really well. Like the sequence where all the cabinets are open, and then Toni Collette is off doing something else, and then it pans back, and all the cabinets are open again after she has shut them all in an impossibly quick amount of time. When Haley Joel Osment as her son Cole is like trapped upstairs in the closet at the birthday party, when he's in his tent and all the clothespins are being plucked slowly and opening up the tent. There's all of these childhood fears that are being played with. But it's also this deeply felt family drama about, I mean, maybe it's not about this, but the character that I connect with the most is Toni Collette as the mom. Who's just like completely unable to help her son or understand what's going on with him, and really trying to connect with him, but just like there's this like divide between them, and this complete lack of communication, and she's kind of helpless to help him. And obviously this is a movie about a kid who can see dead people. Haley Joel Osment, Haley Joel Osment is, first of all, incredible child performance. Mm-hmm. It is being terrorized by these ghosts, and that he doesn't understand what they want, what's going on. I think it. Sorry, I kind of can't talk about this movie without kind of babbling a little bit. I think it presents a really interesting look at death and the afterlife, or concepts of what it could be, or the way that death kind of overlaps with the world. But also, this is a movie that makes me just kind of weep uncontrollably, but especially the Toni Collette scene in Traffic at the end, where he talks about having spoken with his late grandmother, and like that, do I make her proud? Like that whole thing. And it's just like, it's such an overwhelming movie. And obviously I'm not even talking about the twist, because who gives a fuck about the twist? It's a good twist. It's great, but it's just a great movie in and of itself, regardless of the thing that is. And that's why I think that it's so special. And it's The Sixth Sense. It's a great movie. That's my 2 cents on The Sixth Sense.
No, clearly Shyamalan's best, and I think you're right. Like it's just as good a movie if you watch the whole thing. If the twist doesn't happen, or if we're told what the twist happens 3 minutes into the movie, it's still just as good an experience.
I've never seen The Sixth Sense without knowing the twist.
Yes, yeah,
same.
Me too.
Actually, same.
Yeah, it's really hard to do that these days, and thankfully my boyfriend did not know the twist when I showed it to him, and I was so lucky that
you got to experience it vicariously, at least.
Oh my god, yeah, it was a beautiful thing. I have made a habit of showing him showing him movies where the twist is, spoiler alert, the twist is that someone has been dead the whole time, and he never sees it coming. And it shocks him every time, and it's been great.
Incredible.
That's amazing.
But yeah, anyway, any other thoughts on The Sixth Sense? I mean,
this is a very sentimental horror movie, and therefore I love it.
Yes, it's so sentimental. It's so earnest.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know Rob's particular feelings about this film, but I'll bet this was a formative film for him. Given it came out when he was 17,
yeah.
He went right into film school the year after it came out. This was an important film to Rob. I'm willing to guarantee that. I don't know that, but I'm willing to guarantee.
Yeah, and it's a movie that is a very kind of film school use of film language too. Like the color red shows up before the ghosts show up. Like it's a very it's got secret codes that I think Rob is a very kind of Rob use of film language.
It's a very, well, again, in insofar as the 250 is kind of the like enter here. Mm-hmm. This is like a really transparent formalist film.
Yeah.
Like it is real easy to read. It is real easy to see how he's foreshadowing the twist later on. So it makes you feel smart. And I mean that in a good way. I like movies that make me feel smart a lot more than I like movies that make me feel dumb, unless that movie is Megalopolis, in case I want to have its babies.
But yes, that's The Sixth Sense. It's just a glorious exercise.
It sure is. There has been no overlap so far.
I'm shocked.
There has been no
this.
overlap. I'm curious if my number 2 is the point where that will finally happen. It would have been a point of overlap between me and Rob. This is one of our films we had in common, I will say. And I'm just going to say it because I've talked about this movie 10 trillion times. What's left to say? Raiders of the Lost Ark, 1981. The newest film on my list, because I am who I am and you are all who you are all. The closest I came to a film made during my life or Rob's life. But it's Raiders. And he was a big Indiana Jones guy. I know he liked the third one, but he and I watched Indiana Jones films together. And I mean, this is one of my favorite movies, always has been. I've said a lot about Raiders. It's, again, sort of like we had with Jurassic Park and our other Spielberg. It's just so good. It's obviously so good. What's left to say about it? But yeah.
Brennan, I'm going
to
save you now. I've never seen Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh my goodness. Okay. I mean, well, yes. Thank you for giving me this gift.
Have you seen any Indiana Jones picture?
Yes, I've seen all the others.
Jesus! How does that happen? You've seen Dial of Destiny, but you haven't seen Raiders?
It hasn't been intentional. It hasn't happened.
But you've seen Dial of Destiny.
Maybe.
Which is like a super rating anal wart of a movie.
You know the types of movies I tend to gravitate towards.
I guess that's fair.
Like, I have seen almost every movie that has won the fucking Razzie Award for Worst Picture at this point. And I have not seen Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, dear.
Like
we are all on our journey.
When we were watching, because we had a little memorial watch party of Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom over the weekend, I happened to mention that I hadn't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark. And it inspired a reaction very similar to the one that I'm doing right now.
Clearly should have been part of that watch party. I was instead at a family event, but
and
I would have made you watch it while I was watching you watch it to make sure you did it.
The host of this watch party, in fact, said, "Okay, we're watching Raiders right after this is over." I had to go because we had company coming over, but it will happen, I promise.
Okay.
Because among other things, my husband is going to listen to this and then he's going to be like, "We are watching Raiders of the Lost Ark right now."
Does your husband not know?
Wait, does he not know?
I'm not sure he does.
That feels like a marriage imperiling secret.
Might be how he finds out that I haven't seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, or maybe I'll just tell him after this is over.
It's just like, you're going to hear something very ugly about me on the next podcast, and I want you to hear it from me first.
Hey, I'm not saying that I don't like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I'm sure I will.
Yeah. Do you like any of the other 4?
I love Temple of Doom a whole lot.
Then you'll like Raiders.
And Last Crusade is fine.
Then you'll like Raiders.
Okay.
Yes. No, Raiders of the Lost Ark is a great movie. Again, it's I don't know what you could possibly say about it other than, like, Steven Spielberg, there's a reason so many of his movies are on the top 250 list. He is like the populist filmmaker.
100%.
Blockbuster cinema exists in a large part because of Steven Spielberg's contributions to cinema. Maybe in entire part, essentially. And he just, for a very long time, knew what he was doing.
I mean, Spielberg and James Cameron are the only people to have directed multiple films that took the title of the highest grossing film of all time.
Yes, exactly. And Raiders of the Lost Ark, great movie. Another excellent use of Harrison Ford. Another great John Williams score we're throwing into the mix here. I think it absolutely deserves a spot on the list. Another great swing by Tim on the.
Thank you. I feel so satisfied to know that you're not hating my list.
Well, I've seen some of the movies on it.
That's fair.
Speaking of, are we going to
number one?
Are we going to find out if I've seen a single movie on Mandy's list?
Well, context clues indicate that I will not be overlapping with Tim on this episode.
So it's newer than 40-something years old.
Indeed.
You know what? You know something? It was made more or less during my life, so it's not old.
Yeah, I respect that. Yeah, this one was made during my life as well. We're staying in the 90s to round things out. This will not be a surprise entry to anybody who knows me well or who has looked at my Letterboxd recently. But first I'm going to throw out a couple of the other cuts that I made from my long list that especially hurt. So, for example, I didn't write down the numbers that these were on the IMDb Top 250, but they were all there, I promise. The Terminator was cut from the long list, Goodbye Terminator, because everybody loves the Terminator, and thus it was violating my rules. I also cut Amadeus from my long list. That I remember is number 73, because, again, everybody loves Amadeus, and it didn't feel quite within the spirit of the rest of this list for me to be like, I love Amadeus, just like everybody else does. And then the other film that I toyed with putting on here and decided that it would be unforgivable to have two movies this similar to each other on the list was that I cut, I believe this one is actually at number 27. I think it's one place behind Life is Beautiful, and that is The Green Mile. Because I decided that I could not have two Frank Darabont Stephen King adaptations set in prisons on my list, because my number one is number one on the IMDb Top 250. That is 1994's and Frank Darabont's The Shawshank Redemption. This is another one that can verify Rob also loved, because it was his top choice for Stephen King adaptations when y'all did top 5 Stephen King adaptations, and he was correct, and this was another one where I was 100% on his side throughout the whole episode. Brennan, you're looking at me funny.
I mean, that... Okay. I mean...
Okay, I wasn't
The Shining,
totally
more
on
like
his
The
side.
Shitting.
I wasn't totally on his side. But I have to admit that I am who I am, and I love The Shawshank Redemption more than I love The Shining, because I love The Shawshank Redemption more than I love any other movie.
People obviously do. It has always been the number one. I mean, I don't think it was literally the first film that was number one on this list. It got to be number one so early.
I'm sure it did.
And it has stayed there.
I feel like it has
forever.
battled with The Godfather before.
It's battled with The Godfather. I think briefly when everyone had Dark Knight fever, Dark Knight swept up there for a little bit.
It might have. But it's
I
never,
mean,
I doubt it has ever left the top 5, and it may have never left the top 3.
Surely never left the top 5. Surely spent more time at number 1 than not at number 1.
Almost certainly.
That feels right.
Yeah. Anyway, aside from The Wicker Man, which is my favorite movie, I love this movie more than I love any other movie. Because, again, I am who I am. So again, none of you don't know what The Shawshank Redemption is, because if you're listening to this podcast, if you haven't seen The Shawshank Redemption, you at least know every plot beat and have seen it parodied within an inch of its life. Again, it's a pretty big cultural touchstone. But this is based on Stephen King's novella Rita Hayworth and The Shawshank Redemption, and it is about a banker, played by Tim Robbins, who is wrongfully accused and convicted, spoilers, of the murder of his wife and her lover, and is sentenced to 2 life terms in Shawshank, which means that he has no chance of parole. He will be stuck there for the rest of his life. This is Stephen King's famous Shawshank prison in Maine, where he loves to send minor and sometimes major characters in his books. And there in Shawshank prison, he meets a motley crew of fellow long-term inmates who may or may not be waiting on parole dates that may or may not ever come, and adapts to life inside, but never actually loses his hope of one day regaining his life on the outside. And it is his presence there that teaches some of his fellow long haulers in Shawshank prison to revitalize their hope in their own lives once again. This is an incredibly beautiful movie. It's one of those movies that it has a deadly running time. It is another one of those movies with the worst running time, because I want to say it is 154 minutes. That's one of the worst running times that you can possibly have. It has a tendency to state its themes out loud, which is another thing that I hate. So I should absolutely hate this movie, and instead I have seen it, I believe, 29 times at last count, and I will probably see it 29 more, and I will cry every single time I watch it, because the last 20 minutes of this movie just do that to me. Because again, I am a sentimental little snowflake. I was in fact arguing with people, not really arguing, more like discussing and making my thoughts known this movie with people in the alternate ending Discord today, because they were voicing, the usual thoughts of like, it's good, but it's not great, it's overrated, it's been artificially shoved up in everybody's esteem by Ted Turner and his scheme to make it the only movie anybody ever watched for the rest of their lives, which is not wrong. And you know what? Okay, fine. I don't care. This movie has a perfect cast. It is the third movie on my list to feature Morgan Freeman in a very Morgan Freeman type role. Tim Robbins is great. Bob Gunton as the evil warden is great. I've always been very fond of William Sadler as the kind of like comic relief prisoner. William Sadler is a very interesting actor who is not in nearly enough things, is my general William Sadler take. It's got a lot of moments that, again, are iconic for good reason. The moment when Andy, Tim Robbins' banker, takes over the warden's office and uses it to play opera music to the entire prison and remind them all kind of what freedom sounds like for a moment. The time that he kind of tricks Clancy Brown into, well, not really tricks, but manipulates Clancy Brown, who plays the sadistic captain of the guards, into getting a bunch of beers for him and his fellow prisoners in return for some tax advice, and they get to sit on the roof and feel like free men, as Morgan Freeman said. And then, of course, the last 15 minutes or so of the movie post his escape, when Morgan Freeman, who by then has been released on parole, figures out through some carefully laid clues in Maine hayfields where Andy has gone and meets up with him again south of the border. And there's this like sweet little piano piece that plays over as the two of them recognize each other on the beach, and then the camera zooms out and we see them give each other a big ol' hug from far, far away as the horns swell and the credits roll. And if you ever see me in front of the Shawshank Redemption at the end, and I am not just like a tear-soaked mess, you can assume that I have been replaced in Invasion of the Body Snatchers style. That is what has happened.
All right.
Because, yeah, I have never not cried at the end of this movie, and it will never not happen no matter how many times I watch it. It's one of those movies that just, like, you leave it feeling happy to be alive. And that is one of my favorite places to be transported by a movie. And it was one of those things that I always felt a lot from Rob when he was talking about movies that he really loved. That they were movies that made him happy that movies existed, and also just happy to be in, to be in the world. And I listened to him talk about Shawshank on that particular episode of the podcast in preparation for this episode. And while, of course, I'm not remembering any of the specific things that he said right now, it was, again, a lot of that, like, this is not what you think of when you think of Stephen King type sentiment, but it's really, I'm a blabbering idiot at this point, but it's a beautiful movie. Like, a movie set in a terrible abusive prison shouldn't be beautiful, but it really is, and I love it so much. And it's one of those, like, it's one of those, like, triumph of the spirit of man movies that should feel so cheesy and overdone, but somehow to me really never does. And I'm gonna shut up now before I just start repeating myself or sobbing.
No, well, I think you're right. Well, I think it's a beautiful...
Have you seen The Shawshank Redemption?
I have seen The Shawshank Redemption.
Okay,
I have seen it. So it's one of 5, so congrats to me. It is my mom's favorite movie. So I've seen it several times.
Your mom is a gentlewoman and a scholar, and
she
I
is.
would like to be her friend.
Yes, yes, she is great. She's one of my favorite people. I think it is a great movie. I think it's very good. I think it's all the things you said. It's not a movie that I included on here. It's not like one of my personal canon, but that doesn't mean it's not a great movie. And look, I like The Shining more, but that's for me. That's for me to decide.
I love The Shining a whole lot, but there's a pedestal and there isn't room for The Shining on it.
That is okay. But I'm hearing what you're saying, and I think to me, like the connection here, it sounds like that and this and Life is Beautiful feel like such a mirror to each other on your list in terms of like finding that space inside like really harrowing conditions that otherwise don't seem like it would be able to foster anything that feels heartwarming or sentimental, and being able to kind of create something out of nothing and something that feels sweet and lovely and heartwarming and life affirming. I think that's really,
and for the movie in particular to not just say, hey, this thing exists and let's not forget about it, but to say, let us make this the thing around which the movie revolves. And there are people who are going to say that we did it wrong, and there are people who are going to say that we were making light of it, and there are people who are going to say that it's cheesy, and we could not give less of a shit.
Yeah, I think that's lovely, and I don't have much to add to that. I appreciate what you're saying.
I feel very attacked. Honestly, no, it's a fine movie. It doesn't do much for me, but I get.
You're
I hear what you're
entitled
saying.
to your wrong feelings.
I think it's a very very lovely defense of it. It is what it is. It's a solid movie. I would agree that it is Frank Darabont's masterpiece of directing Stephen King.
To be
films,
clear,
sure.
I also really love The Green Mile. But
Fair,
I could not put both The Shawshank Redemption and The Green Mile on this list. That was going to be too much.
No, that would have felt.
And
if
the two of them were dangling off a cliff. Let's put it this way: if the two books were dangling off a cliff and I could only save one, I would save The Green Mile. But if the two movies were dangling off a cliff and I could only save one, it would be Shawshank, and it would be an easy choice.
Oh,
sure.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense.
Excellent. Well, very, very lovely defense, very lovely praise of the movie, and I think even of the way it sort of made you feel towards Rob, which is of course what we're here for. Brennan, what is your number one?
Well, my number one is probably it's also my most contemporary on the list. It's number 181 in the top 250. It's from 2015. It is another movie that is you can't step out of it without feeling the expansive possibilities of what cinema can do. It is Mad Max Fury Road. It is maybe the singular work of blockbuster cinema. It is George Miller and auteur, if there ever was one, just taking a studio's money and spending the fuck out of it. Mm-hmm. And it's just a perfectly calibrated action movie. It's got dazzling color. It's got unexpected casting choices turning out perfect performances. Like, I wouldn't have picked Nicholas Hoult to play a war boy in this movie, and I think that performance as Nux is incredible.
Agreed.
I think Charlize Theron obviously is spectacular as Imperator Furiosa. I think Tom Hardy giving an almost wordless performance as Mad Max. I almost blanked on the title character of the movie. Yep. That is such a compelling role, and it's a 2-hour movie, but there's no fat on this thing. It's such a detailed world. There's story jammed into every inch of the frame. I think it is just like it's just this kaleidoscopic world of like you're just kind of Clockwork Orange style strapped to your chair for the entire runtime of the movie, and I feel like it's just such a vibrant and exhilarating window into the possibilities of what the the art of cinema can do, and the art of blockbuster cinema specifically. And I think that's a beautiful thing to have on the IMDb Top 250. And I think that's one of the things that's why it's my number one. I mean, it's one of my favorite movies, and that's also why it's my number one. But I think it's one of the things, because this is like a mainstream wide release. It won Oscars. It made some money. And I think Rob loved it. I didn't double check my Rob scores before doing this, but it felt right for this kind of list.
I'm trying to remember. I know Carrie did not like it, and I can't remember on that episode whether Rob sided with Carrie or sided with me. Obviously, I love this movie. This is among my favorite movies of the 2010s, and for all the reasons you said. You know, very, very beautiful, very kinetic, very, very popcorn movie.
This is a movie I don't need to say anything about. This is a Blade Runner movie for me, where I recognize that it is a very, very good example of the thing that it is, and I don't like the thing that it is. And that's why nobody really needs to hear what I have to say about it, because this is not a movie made for me, and that's fine. I am happy that this movie is in the world and that the people it was made for love it the way that they do.
Yes, and yeah, I understand that, and I respect it. It is a wavelength movie. You gotta be on it, because it is doing the thing that it's doing, and it's not changing that thing.
Nope.
No, quite literally, it does one thing for 2 hours.
Yeah, but no, I just think in terms of the way that it uses the techniques in the craft of cinema is just like really, it's just really exciting, and it really makes you, like, if you in any way have like a filmmaking bone in your body and you're looking at it and thinking about the way that it's made, I feel like it makes you want to go out and do something and roll around in the sand and take a camcorder and play around. I think it's very inspiring in a lot of ways.
Also, Rob gave this 4 stars, so I think that's solidly in the Rob liked it a lot.
Yeah, pretty solid.
Rob liked it. Yeah.
Thank you for doing your due diligence that I did not do. Oh, and since Mandy, you threw out your runner-ups, I will do that too, because I know they're not on Tim's list because of your 100 rule, and also your 1981 is your most.
They were made in the last
exactly.
half century.
Obviously, Modern Times I mentioned earlier. That was one of mine. But also Parasite, the Bong Joon-ho movie, Silence of the Lambs, The Terminator, also on mine, Mandy, and The Exorcist was one I considered. Anyway, I want to hear Tim's number one.
Yeah.
I will also, start by throwing out some of my also rans. When I switched very abruptly about 2 hours ago into maybe I should do favorites instead of a best, The Terminator was definitely one of the ones I thought about, as was Alien. But from the original version of the list, when I was focused more on kind of a best of, and some of these were on the top 5 and got kind of quickly scrubbed off of it. But some titles that I think really speak to, for me, what the IMDb 250 does, which is kind of provide that gateway drug that, like, here's where to start. If you don't know, here's the kind of movies that exist out in the world. I would say 2001: A Space Odyssey, currently 96 on the list, was a huge movie for me in that sense, kind of baby's first art film. Sunset Boulevard would be very important to me on that list. Lawrence of Arabia, which is barely on the top 100. It is currently 99. All movies that were really crucial to my kind of formation as someone who liked movies. Another almost candidate for the favorites list was WALL-E, which is a film, obviously, that I've talked about extensively, have built a academic research project around the fact that I love WALL-E so much. And the film that I was just about, it was basically between this and Seven Samurai, and at the end it was like, look, if only one of these stayed in the world, I'd rather it be Seven Samurai. But the number 10 film, which would have been by far the highest ranked film I had on my list, would be The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, number 10 on the IMDb Top 250. And in more characteristic Tim stuff, some of the Japanese films that I had to cut because I had too damn many Japanese films would have been Harakiri and The Grave of the Fireflies. But none of those are my actual number one. My number one is, I think, probably not a huge surprise. It is the other most Hollywood film ever made, other than Singin' in the Rain. The only thing that could have made it more Hollywood would have been having Technicolor, which it does not. It is a black and white movie from 1942. It is Casablanca, which just has always been my, like, if I need a quick answer to the question, what's my favorite movie of all time? That's the one I go with. Just a faultless story about people in love and people kind of surrounding them and like what's going on in the world and how individual lives are impacted by the ebb and flow of society around them. Of course, it's a World War II film about Humphrey Bogart plays a cynical American hiding out in Morocco with his bar. And one day into this bar comes the love of his life, a beautiful Swedish woman named Ilsa, who is currently dating a leader in the French resistance. And so Humphrey Bogart has to make the decision, does he throw this French resistance leader to the Nazis to break up the relationship, or does he try and help and in so doing potentially put himself in a position that he'll have to say goodbye to the love of his life for once and for all? Spoiler alert, he decides that the problems of three little people just don't amount to a hill of beans. And that's part of it. This is I think this is the Hamlet of movies. Like there's that famous joke, like the two old ladies go to see Hamlet for the first time, and one of them is like, I don't know why people think it's such a good play. It's just a bunch of famous quotes run end to end. Casablanca is kind of that. Like 3/4 of this screenplay is like a famous quote from movies, including my single favorite thing ever said in a film, which is when the Nazis are interrogating why Bogart has come to Morocco, and he said, I came for my health. I came to Casablanca for the waters. And the Nazi leader, or is it Nazi or is it the French policeman? I can't remember. But says, waters, what waters? Casablanca is in the desert. And Bogart responds, I was misinformed. And I just think that line is so good. And of course, this is also where we got, I'm shocked to find that gambling is going on here, which is maybe the most applicable quote in the history of cinema. But yeah, so just a movie that is firing on all cylinders. I love it to pieces. Insanely, this movie basically didn't have a script. They just kind of kept shoving the script together while they were filming it. They did not know how it was going to end until like a week before they shot the ending. And it turned out perfectly. So they made the right choices. And I will say, in terms of the Rob connection, I don't know how much he loved it, or if he loved it, or if he merely liked it. But many years ago, shortly after Rob and Carrie actually started dating, we kind of decided to do a fun little friend thing, not just the two of them, like a group of people, but like a sort of collective of let's get together and watch good movies that we need to see. And so Casablanca was actually the first movie I ever forced Rob and Carrie to watch, and still feel good about having done that because it's my favorite. It's my favorite movie. So
it's a great pick, and the thing
have either of you seen Casablanca?
Yes.
I have, in fact, a heartwarming Casablanca story.
Okay, as long as that involves having seen it. That's all.
Yes, I have seen it. I, in fact, own it on Blu-ray, I believe. Because it was a wedding present for me and my husband from his late uncle, of whom we were both very fond. Our son is partly named after him.
Aww.
Who got us two things. Something very, like, basic off of our registry, and the Blu-ray of Casablanca, because he was like, all people need to own and have seen this movie.
Oh,
he's a wise man.
So had you not seen it before?
I had not seen it, and neither had my husband, so we watched it together after we got that Blu-ray, and we both thought it was real good.
It's really
real good.
Or actually, he might have seen it before. If he had not seen it in a long time. I had not seen it before.
Yeah, and it is really good. The thing they don't tell you about Casablanca, obviously, it's a classic. It's got all the quotes, the basics of Casablanca just from existing in the world. It's a really fucking funny movie.
It is.
It's really funny. It's when every movie had to be at least a little bit funny.
Yeah.
Because every movie had to be at least a little bit of everything. It's got the funny, it's romantic and sad. It has one of my favorite sentimental moments, to go back to your types of lists, Mandy, which is when, in order to drown out the Nazis, they sing, like the French Resistance member has kind of whips up everyone to sing La Marseillaise. Mm-hmm. And it's like straight up refugees from World War II who'd come to Hollywood to find work as extras singing La Marseillaise. And one of them is like weeping openly on camera. And it's like, this is very important to watch, I think, that scene.
Yeah.
Do you remember when there was a terrible animated ripoff of this movie?
I can think of multiple animated ripoffs of this movie. Are you referring to the Warner Brothers short Carrot Blanca?
No, I'm referring to Food Fight.
Oh, God. Oh, God.
Sorry. Didn't mean to remind you that existed.
No. I had forgotten. Shame that I had forgotten Food Fight.
I can hardly think of a better time to bring up Dex Dog Detective than the Rob Tribute podcast.
You know, I feel like it's how he would have wanted to be remembered.
I'm really glad that you forced Rob and Carrie to watch Casablanca and that you suffered Food Fight alone.
You know. Do we ever truly see Food Fight alone when the devil is always sitting at our shoulder when we watch it?
Anyway,
it's very true.
This was lovely. Thank you so much for doing this, everybody.
Yeah, thank you for joining in. Do either of you have any last thoughts about the IMDb or about your lists or about Rob in general?
It's been hard for me to figure out what to say publicly about this because he totally just stole all that money from you in poker that one time. I get it. Yeah, no, he punched me in the face every time he saw me. And he never did apologize for running over your cat, as far as I'm aware. Yeah. No, it's just dealing with this kind of thing is such a private thing for me. And obviously, like, most of my interactions with Rob have been public, which is very weird. So, like, obviously, I don't know, which is why I feel like I kind of should share something or not, or I don't know. It's not necessarily anyone's business. But I feel very grateful for him pulling me into this space and being very welcoming with the podcast, and especially with I think the time that I got to spend the most with Rob, like, most directly, was doing that the podcast that we did that did not end up really moving forward, but the one that we did about television, where we talked about the Falcon and the Winter Soldier. We did all 6 episodes of that terrible Marvel television show. And I have very fond memories of getting to do that. And I look forward to re-listening to that when I feel ready for it. And that's the thing that I want to do. To commemorate my experience with him. Sure. And I'm just grateful to get to be a part of this whole thing. And I think that's what I want to say. And I appreciate and I think part of the list that I was trying to create here was, like, I do appreciate the way that he was kind of unembarrassed to be who he was, especially in the face of cinema and the things that he liked, and to encourage that and to encourage that conversation. And I think that's really important. And I think that liking the things that you like shouldn't be something that's ever embarrassing, and it so frequently is. And I think that it's a powerful sentiment, and I'm glad that he was never afraid to do that. And yeah, that I'm done. That's it.
I think that of the 3 of us that are here, I knew Rob the least well. Like, Brennan, you had actually met him in person, like,
yeah, a couple times,
multiple times. Yes, like, he and I had talked on podcasts. We had texted. I never, unfortunately, actually got to meet him in person. But I have, nevertheless, some very fond Rob memories, one of which I will share here. So, first of all, being here right now is, like, again, not in the circumstances. I wish the circumstances were anything but this. But it's a little bit of, like, a dream come true for me, because back when I first started listening to the Alternate Ending podcast while I was cleaning dishes in my kitchen, I spent a lot of time being like, man, I would love to be friends with these guys. They seem like so much fun. We would have such a good time talking about movies. I hope they wouldn't just think that I'm a total dork. And lo and behold, here I am, and here I've been for a little while, and a lot of that is down to Rob. And without the, I have met, like, real friends whom I adore through the little community that he was so instrumental in building. And then I also had the once-in-a-lifetime experience for the site that I got to interview Uwe Boll.
Oh, yeah, that's so cool.
I don't know how much you all know about Uwe Boll's reputation when he's doing interviews, but he apparently has a flair for the dramatic sometimes, and he's not always overly fond of the movie reporters who are interviewing him, and so he'll sometimes like do things like show up naked to the interview or things like that. And so as I was getting set up, I got a text from Rob that was like, I don't know if you have heard these stories, but I just want to let you know that if you need me to jump in, all you need to do is text me, and I will be there, and I will make sure that it's okay. And as it turned out, it was a lovely interview and a really nice conversation, and I had a great time, and he didn't try anything weird with me. It was a fun time, but it was just kind of like a he was in my corner moment that was really, really sweet. And just to second what Brennan said about, like, people who love movies sometimes don't spend enough time loving movies. And Rob spent a lot of time loving movies. And that love was always, like, palpable on this podcast, especially. And it was unembarrassed and it was unqualified. And the world is poorer to not have that in it anymore.
Yeah, thank you both. I will just say I'm here because of Rob. He wanted to do this site. He wanted to do this podcast. I was content to just, do my little blogger free domain website and just kind of keep chipping away at it until, I died of old age. And he kind of encouraged me to try and push for bigger things. Podcasting had never been something I thought I would want to do. And here I am. And it's definitely impossible for me to say that he did not affect my life in some very, very important, profound ways. It's so true what both of you are saying. Like, he just was someone who was really into movies. And as someone who kind of has, more of like an Anton ego relationship to my chosen art form of like, I love the 1% that I don't want to consign to the fires of hell. I think it was good for me. It was grounding, I think, for me to be around someone who just liked movies, who just consumed them in a way that was welcoming of what they are and not sort of insisting that they have to be a certain thing. So I think that's important. And, it is very difficult to say where I'd be, where this community would be. There would be no community. Like, we're all here because of his vision for what this can be, and that's irreplaceable. And we are going to move forward. I think that's just something that he would want. He would not want the site to just kind of dry up and stop existing. So we will continue to have this community. We will continue to have this site. We will continue to have podcasts. But it's gonna change, because I think a lot of what it was his kind of vision, and I think the only way I can think of to honor that vision is really to say, no one could love it the way he did, and I think it would feel hollow for us to try and do it. So this will be our final top 5 podcast. That was Rob's thing. He loved it. His favorite part was always hearing not so much what the lists were, but what people's methodology was for getting to that list. Like, he just loved thinking about how to quantify and how to think about that. And that is what I'll think about, whenever I think about these top 5 episodes, is just how into it he was, just as a way to engage and a way to think. And so I'm so glad we were able to do one last top 5 to remember him, to honor him, and to thank him for all the work that he did in making Alternate Ending all the things it is. And thank you all for listening, and I hope you will join us as we continue to evolve and to find new ways of honoring Rob's vision with the site and its ever-evolving forms and identities, and there will, of course, be more of that, in the weeks to come. But for right now, let's just remember where we've been and remember the man who really brought it all possible. So thank you, Brennan. Thank you, Mandy. And really especially thank you, Rob. You will be missed. And I'd like to end this episode by just sharing a few more thoughts from people who knew Rob's work and were part of the community and just had some more sentiments to share about him.
This testimonial comes to us from Hadalvarður Jon. Rob always made me feel very welcome, both as a podcast host and when we in the AE community were having our movie trivia nights. Rob's boundless enthusiasm for movies, even the most dubious movies, was infectious. His journey into eventually becoming a filmmaker was nothing less than inspiring. I will always cherish his various attempts at pronouncing my name, some of which were remarkably close. It's very fitting that he ultimately chose to call me by my old nickname, Holly, which is what my friends call me. Rob, I will miss you terribly.
Hi, my name is Christopher Brown. By creating Alternate Ending, Rob allowed me to become more than a commenter on a blog and to become a member of a community and to meet some really, really cool people that way. And even though I never got to meet him, I cannot thank him enough for that.
I've only had the pleasure of meeting Rob the one time, an event where he was the very first person to speak to me, as I didn't know anybody in the theater yet personally. So the parasocial nature of feeling his absence from Alternate Ending, even after he'd taken leave for film producing, should intellectually be a moderately weighty one. But I've gone on to revisit so many episodes in the weeks since his passing was announced, and maybe through a hopeful ear, I can't help seeing in his qualities as a weekly podcast host, within those 30 to 60 minutes, the qualities that seem to have made him so affable a presence in the world. His welcoming interest in other voices, his swift control of a conversation, especially when it comes to his segues between segments, which are hilarious and smooth as hell. His eager passion for talking about the movies he wants to talk about, and even his effortless talent as a musician all seem to feel like the most inviting part of those weekly mornings. And I think in our post-Batman talk, the familiarity with that voice and cadence assured me he was the genuine article on these fronts.
Hey, my name's Dan Stalkup. I discovered Alternate Endings sometime early in the pandemic in 2020, and it was a big comfort for me and was something that really helped me get excited about getting back into movies, watching them on a regular basis and thinking about them and discussing them. I actually ended up creating my own movie website and podcast, heavily inspired by Alternate Ending. When Rob created the Discord, it became a virtual home. I befriended a bunch of people in the Alternate Ending community. I always deeply admired Rob's enthusiasm and energy, and especially his ability to bring people together. I know it's not easy to do. Thanks, Rob, for everything. You'll be really deeply missed.
So my relation to Rob is kind of interesting, just kind of in the sense that I guess podcasts are interesting, where, Rob probably never even knew my name, but through the hours of listening to the podcast, I got to kind of feel like I knew him. Anyone who listened to the podcast could clearly see his love for movies, as well as just his love for just life, like all the crazy adventures he and his family would go on. And you could hear the excitement for movies. He loved movies, and it was cool to see him, as the film school dropout to this really kind of seasoned podcast host to, then becoming a movie producer. And, Rob will never know the impact that he had, on me personally. I've met so many new friends through the Discord community. I am going back to school to study film. And he never knew any of that, but listening to the podcast and being introduced to that world and these people and these new friends, again, he never knew the impact that he had, but it did make an impact. And he will be missed. I don't know that there's much more to say other than I'm grateful for the impact that Rob had on me and my life. Kind of as small as it might be, and again, he, I'm sure, had no idea, but we'll miss him a lot.